Um, so good to have you here, Sally, and get to talk to you kind of a little bit about trauma and working through that personally and as you're like coming out of a relationship and what you're working with from there. So, can you explain a little bit about trauma and how it impacts your life?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. Really happy to be doing this with you. So trauma can be categorized and defined in different ways. It's not very linear. It's individually based on the person, the kind of trauma they've been through. In my particular space, and what I tend to work with is trauma from toxic relationships. So healing from relationship trauma. That's kind of my background. I was called to do that from my past and what I've been through. So I was just guided to use my experiences to help others kind of move past that space and into a true life of healing and moving forward with positive growth. Trauma is anything that affects you negatively from negative experiences, bad experiences. It could be something like a death, a car accident, uh, being attacked in some way. In this capacity, it's being manipulated, gaslit, mentally broken down, emotionally broken down, sometimes physically broken down by someone who we look at as a partner. And that can affect you going forward if not tended to properly. If it's not properly worked through, you don't do the proper healing to get through it, it's something that's going to stay with you. It could be feelings of lack of self-worth, guilt, shame, insomnia, um, deteriorating physical health, um, the way we perceive the world going forward and how we interact with people. So trauma is it can affect us in so many ways in many different aspects of our lives. Like I said, it could be the catalyst can be different for different people, but the effects are effectively the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So I heard you share a little bit about if you don't kind of work through that trauma, what that will do for you. So, how does that affect your somebody's ability to reach their full potential in life?
Sure. So when we are in that stagnant space where we are in that negative mindset, that victim mindset, and we're not able to correctly work through that trauma, it's going to affect you in how you interact with other people because you are not able to trust people going forward. You kind of look at them as they have ulterior motives. You know, this person's just out to do the same thing this last person did to me. And it's not necessarily restricted to romantic relationships and partners in that sense. It could be friendships, family members, colleagues. You're going to be hindered in your ability to show up in your true authentic self because you've been broken down to the point where you became like a shell of what you used to be. So you're not presenting your full authentic self with people. So not trusting people, um, having feelings of paranoia of what does this person really want from me? You know, do I need to set my guard up? Do I need to put my walls up? Is it safe for me to be open with this person? Um, Another way that it affects you is when you don't heal, it's it's how you carry yourself into your future. You're going to be limiting yourself. You're going to be working at very minimal capacity of your true full potential, because you're going to be hindered, you're going to be restricted, you're going to be apprehensive on how you interact with people. If you have children, they're going to learn from you and how you approach the world and how you interact in your day-to-day life, and that's going to teach them that they need to be cautious of everything. And don't get me wrong, being cautious is important. Of course, we use our discernment, we use our better judgment, we kind of look for the red flags, but when we don't heal properly from the trauma that we've been through, we're going to look at everybody as a potential enemy and out to get us. And so we are not going to be, you know, so ready to come forth with everything we have. We're going to be inhibited. We're going to be quiet. We're going to be kind of like that person that hides in the corner of a room kind of thing. You're not going to be showing up with your full self because you don't trust your own judgment. You don't trust your own discernment. You don't trust the people around you. You've been broken down. So your self-worth is completely diminished. So how do you have confidence in yourself to move forward, let's say in a professional capacity, when you don't trust that you're able to do something when you actually can? You have just been essentially trained to think that you can't do something. without that person, or you're incapable of being able to move forward without that person that has caused this trauma.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about how this trauma really then carries into your personal, professional life and really affects you. So, what are some effective strategies or techniques that you recommend to help people work through that?
So one thing I really advise is seek professional help. I think that's step one. And I say that because when we are in a toxic relationship and we have been basically brainwashed to believe that we are not good enough, we are not capable enough, we begin to doubt our own reality. We don't know what's truth versus fiction because we've been taught to not believe what we know to be true. When you're in that mind space, you are not able to get out of your own way to be able to see the bigger picture. And that's where a professional can help you do that. I also advise seeking a professional that has been through that same experience because they'll be able to be sympathetic, empathetic. They can relate to the emotions that you're going through, relate to the challenges that you're dealing with because they've been through it themselves.
Right.
So it's easier to speak to somebody that's been there. Sometimes, one of the biggest problems people have when leaving a toxic relationship is the people around them, their support system, which are there and only want the best for them. They want to help them, but they don't know how to help them because they don't know exactly what they've been through. In most people's minds, they can't come to terms with, how did you let this happen? Like, how did you get this far into this toxic situation? Um, as an example, for me personally, I've always been very strong-minded, very, opinionated. I speak my mind. Like, I don't take anything from nobody. And then here I was, a completely broken down person, and I looked in the mirror and I couldn't even recognize who I was anymore. And I had a family member mention to me, he said, he's like, you've always been like this, boss lady, like, you don't take crap off of anybody. Like, how did you let this happen? And that didn't make me feel any better. And if anything, that made me, retreat from wanting to speak to anybody in my inner circle about it because I felt ashamed, because I did say to myself, like, how did you let this happen? Because, if you think about your friend groups, there's usually that one person that everybody goes to for advice and they give the best advice. I was that person.
Mhm.
I was the one that always told people, like my friends, like, you don't need this. This is not okay. You need to put your foot down. But I was not able to take my own advice in my own life.
Yeah.
So that also made it very hard. And that's where the shame and the guilt come into play. Like, how stupid was I that I let this happen? How did this happen? But essentially, and I believe that we'll get into this a little bit later in this conversation, is
Mhm.
that this stems from the past. There's
Yeah.
a reason why these things happen. But going back to my original answer, having a professional that you can speak to that has been through it
Mhm.
makes it so that you have that more safe space to open up and be honest and truthful about your experiences and what you've been through and what your challenges are. Because as much as that your friends and family love you and care for you and want the best for you, there's two things that you have to kind of keep in mind. One is they usually want to tell you the things that you want to hear, not what you need to hear, right? That's not going to help
Mhm.
you. You
Yeah.
need to hear what you need to hear. And two, if they haven't been through it and they see you as somebody that they would never have pictured falling into the situation, sometimes they might say things to make you feel even worse about yourself. And then
Mhm.
at that point, who's going to want to share more, right? So you kind of shut down. And you don't want to go through this alone. You don't
Mhm.
want to go through this process alone. In my situation, I initially did until I finally sought the help that I needed and I found it. But initially, it was me on my own, kind of going through it and trying to understand it. And it wasn't a fun experience to have
Right.
to do that. So yeah, that's number one. I would say is seek professional help.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes, the people closest to us, it's almost like it's even harder for them to zoom out. And I totally can agree with you in saying that they say the things that you want to hear. And you really need some tough love in these situations. And when you have a professional that has gone through it, I feel like that is the best case scenario, right? And they can really walk through it with you and kind of hold your hand through that process. I
Absolutely.
know we talked a little bit about how it could hinder your personal growth, but as you're going through the healing journey and begin healing, how do you see that as being a catalyst for personal growth?
Just to clarify, so how does seeking a professional, be a catalyst for your personal growth?
So as you're starting to heal from this trauma and go through this, how does that experience kind of help develop your personal growth? Like as you're going through the healing and after you're kind of like on the other side of it.
I see. So the journey of true healing is, I'll say this, it's not a cakewalk. It's not a fun experience because there's a lot of inner work that has to be done. So people leaving a toxic relationship have to come into the healing process with the mindset that I need to do some work on myself, right? But this is not a sense of victim blaming or by any means whatsoever. Nobody deserves to be, treated the way that we sometimes get treated by toxic people. But we have to acknowledge and accept the fact that there was something about us that made us a target for these people initially.
Oh, okay.
There was, if you put two people side by side and then you have a toxic person, they're gonna it is built in their DNA to identify the weaker link. It is like it's a part of them to identify immediately, I can control this person and I can't control that person, right? So I like to use the example of if my past person saw me today, he wouldn't even dare to approach me because I carry myself in a different energy. I'm not that same person that I was before, but I have to accept the fact that there was something about me that when he did look at me, when we first met, he felt deeply in his gut that he could control me. And that's something that as we heal, we need to be ready and willing to accept and dive into about ourselves. But through that healing journey, as you see yourself progress, it is not a slow process. It's not a fast process. It is a slow process. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And we need to be prepared for that. But the amazing thing about it is as you kind of go, and journaling is a great way to kind of keep track of your progress. And I say that because when you think about, when I look back on my previous journals and the things I've written, because I write when I'm in that current headspace, whatever is in my mind at that time, that's what I'm writing. That's the thoughts I'm letting out. When I go back now to 3 years ago and see what I wrote and where I am now, you really see the progress that you've made. And that is a huge, plus to have, to be able to look back on and to help you kind of move forward. Without it, sometimes we do feel like we're stagnant and we don't feel like we're moving forward, but you are. And the biggest and hardest step that you did was leaving. And that is a huge accomplishment in itself. Right.
Yeah.
So now we have to work on ourselves. We've kind of eliminated the toxic portion of the equation, but now we have to work on ourselves. And by doing so, the doors that are going to open up for you and the abundance that's going to come towards you and the healthy, loving relationships that are going to come, cross your path, and not just romantic, but all kinds of relationships. You're going to have the right friends. You're going to have the right loved ones around you. You're going to have the right, potential, life partner next to you. People that will never make you feel like you have to put those walls back up again. And the great thing is when you do go through the healing journey, you can trust yourself again. You can trust your own judgment again. And that is huge. To be able to look at a person and say, something's not right about this person, so I'm going to keep my distance. Whereas before, you might have looked at them and said, oh, they want to be my friend, or oh, they want to talk to me. And then you let them in. And before you know it, your boundaries are crossed. You have no boundaries set for yourself, and you become like a people pleaser, kind of like a doormat, which is what I was. I became a doormat. I became a doormat to make this person happy at the cost of my own happiness. And so when you go through this healing process, it's amazing to see how your self-confidence, your self-worth starts to build back up, and you feel ready to take on challenges. You feel ready to put yourself out there and take on the world, essentially, and know that you can do it because you've been through a very, very hard process. So it's like, if I survive this, this is no problem. I got this.
Yeah. I love the idea of journaling. I think that sometimes in the day-to-day, we can get caught up and feel like I'm not making any progress, I'm not getting anywhere. But when you're able to look back on that and see where you were a few weeks ago, a month ago, a year ago, that's huge. And I think some people also feel like the healing process should be linear, but we know that it's kind of like this at times, right? And so what role do you feel like resilience plays in this journey for individuals going through this?
So you have to be resilient when you hit the roadblocks that you are bound to hit. It is inevitable. You're not, it's every day is not going to be a great day. Every day is not going to be like, uh, uh, you're not going to have a chart where you can, visually see, oh, I've made this much progress today. It's something that you feel internally. You have your good days, you have your bad days. I can attest to that.
Mm-hmm.
I had just as many bad days as I had good days. And it's on those bad days that you have to trust the process, be patient with yourself and give yourself some grace, and have faith that you are on the right path to healing.
Mm-hmm.
That is where your faith, resilience, determination, whatever you want to call it, has to kick in. And it's not to say that you're not allowed to have bad days. Those emotions that we feel on the bad days, they're necessary. Those are emotions that we are releasing. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to yell, yell. If you need to break something not expensive, hopefully. Go like, do some yard work, get your energy out, go to the gym, but let your aggression out. You're feeling those emotions for a reason. Those emotions are there for a reason. You have to work through them. You work through them in a healthy way and get release them. If you hold them down, you don't let yourself cry, you don't let yourself feel anger, you put on a smiling face every day and pretend like you're okay when you're not, you're essentially not healing properly, and you're not healing in a healthy way. And you are more than likely going to find yourself back in the same cycle as you were that you just gotten out of, which defeats the purpose, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like as you're working through some of these healing aspects, you're kind of refining yourself, right? And really rediscovering who you are as a person. So in your experience, as you're healing and going through this, how did someone begin the process of self-discovery again and finding who they really are?
That was a big challenge for me personally, because I had lost completely who I was. I had given up my morals, my ethics, the things that I loved, the people that I loved. I was detached from everything. So I essentially had to learn who I was all over again and find out the good aspects about myself. You need to spend time alone. That's hard to do sometimes, but you need to spend time alone. Because again, when you have the outside factors, whether they're there for good or for bad, whatever the case may be, their opinions, their beliefs, their advice is going to create a bias. You're going to see yourself through their eyes, not through your own. Okay. That's why you need to spend time alone. I can tell you that I spent close to 2 years almost in solitary confinement.
Wow.
It wasn't easy, and it's not to say that everybody has to do that, but that's what I needed. That's what worked for me. I had a lot of demons to work out and inner healing that I needed to work on. But when you allow yourself to be with yourself, you begin to understand who you are again. You understand the emotions that you're feeling. You understand why you're feeling those emotions. You begin to know intuitively why you're feeling them, why you have to work through them. As you do that, you become a whole person again, because you're starting with a shell of a person. When you leave a toxic relationship, you are not who you used to be. I would look in the mirror and not even recognize the person looking back at me. I couldn't tell you what I enjoyed. I couldn't tell you what my hobbies were. I couldn't tell you what I was passionate about. I couldn't tell you what my favorite music was, because all of that was brainwashed out of me to only like what that person liked, only listen to what that person listened to, only do what that person wanted to do, only hang out with that person's friends. So I lost who I was as a person. And that's why you need to spend time alone.
Alone, yeah. So I hear you saying, spending time alone is important to really figuring out what your values are and your beliefs and what you enjoy. And I know you shared that it was about 2 years for you. And I'm sure during that time there was some roadblocks that came in. And so what are some of those things that people might run into when they're trying to rediscover themselves?
So you might have days when you feel lonely. And you feel inclined to reach out to people. And it's okay to reach out to loved ones, to family and friends that you know and trust and know that are there for you. And it's okay to tell them, I don't want to talk about anything specific. I just want a friend or a loved one to talk to.
Yeah.
so that you don't have that loneliness around you. Um, so feeling lonely is one, feeling stagnant is another, feeling like you're not making progress. That's a big challenge. Um, Feeling paranoid, not knowing who to trust around you. Um, so that's why it's very important to have your, true support system around you, the people that that
Hmm.
were there for you before and that have been with you through it and that are there with you after. Um, and use your discernment as you're talking to people. You'll know as you're talking to your friends and family and loved ones, that as you're kind of explaining things or talking through things, if you choose to talk through things with them, you'll know who's there for your highest good and who's there to kind of hold you down and not really there for your best interest.
Yeah.
So loneliness, I think, is a huge one. Feeling stagnant is another one. Lack of trust, feeling paranoid is a third one, because you can't trust yourself yet. So how can you trust other people?
Yeah.
Because you can't even trust your own mind at this
Hmm.
point.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, even like what you're sharing, about trust and paranoia, a lot of that is a mindset that you're then put into, right? And so, how do you get to work through that and shift your mindset and become able to kind of empower yourself again?
So this might sound a little bit extreme. For me, in my personal experience, I literally had to uproot my life and I left. I
Okay.
moved to a whole new state. Um, my past person was actively trying to kind of keep tabs on me and send people around to spy on me, and a lot of other things that we don't even need to get into right here, but a lot of things that were meant to kind of destroy me in more than one way. I needed to leave. And I realized that that's not feasible for everybody. Not everybody can pack up and move
Mhm.
and start all over again. The best way to kind of work through the paranoia and the not knowing if you can trust people, you need to stay around people that you know. Don't try to welcome in new people during this process. Now is not the time to be making new friends. Now is not the time to be looking for a new love partner. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are just, they feel like they need to be with somebody. They can't
Mm.
be single. They need to be with somebody.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, that will be the biggest mistake you will ever make if you try to go out and find somebody new
Mhm.
when you are still in the healing process and have not truly healed yet, because that's going to be a disaster waiting to happen. So, um, to kind of reduce the feeling of paranoia and fear and not being able to trust people, stay with the people that you know, the people that have been with you before, that
Mhm.
are there for your highest good, so that you can feel like you can let your guard down. So definitely steer away from anybody you don't know. It's not you being antisocial, it's you taking time to kind of work on yourself. And if you think about it, what would meeting somebody new bring it? Like what's going to happen? What are you bringing to the table other than trauma and fear and anxiety and worry and paranoia? That's not going to end well. So stay
Right.
with the people that you know until you feel comfortable in your healing process, that you are now ready to trust your own discernment of letting new people into your life. And
Yeah.
that will happen.
It's really interesting you sharing, there's a lot of people that will jump into trying to meet all new people because they're tired of what the people around them have to say, or they do want to jump into another relationship because they can't be single and they feel so dependent on others. And I know that that can be difficult and kind of a belief and a mindset, again, that they have. And so, what are some other kind of limiting beliefs that you feel like people who are going through the healing process have?
Um, One thing that comes to mind is they feel like they are not enough. They're
Mhm.
not enough to go out and, be their best self. They're not enough to contribute anything to a partner. They're not enough to contribute to a friend. They're not enough to be, you know, a good family member to, the people they love. Um, they're they're not able to. You have to look at it this way. You're working with someone who has been stripped of everything they've ever known about themselves. And it's almost like setting like a child out into the world who fears everything, who doesn't know where to go, what to do, who they can talk to, who's okay, who's not okay, um, and what they're capable of. You're gonna face those challenges where you're not gonna feel like you're enough,
Mhm.
because most of the time, if not all the time, your toxic partner has made you feel like you are nothing without them. You can't do anything without them. You're not enough without them. You can't move forward without them, and you need them to be able to, have a good life. You're not going to have friends without them. You're not going to have, fun without them. And that's another thing is we go from, even in toxic relationships where we have somewhat of a social life, to now you're basically in isolation and alone. And sometimes that's where there's a kind of like a breakdown, where people will kind of cave and start to reach out to people to try to hang out, and not necessarily the past, toxic person, but maybe even mutual friends. You want to steer away from that. You don't want to have any kind of communication with anybody that's associated with this person, because more often than not, they're getting information about you, and that's
Yeah.
something you don't want.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you've mentioned it a few times, kind of feeling isolated or alone, or, what support do you have and who are you going to for support? And so, what advice do you have for people who are feeling isolated or feeling like they're lacking support?
That's where a professional comes in,
Mm,
because you need to have that person to go to, because not only are you having that human interaction with this person, but you're also able to talk your feelings out with someone who understands.
mm,
A lot of times, for me personally, I felt alone because nobody in my life, no one, had really been through what I had been through. They couldn't understand what I was going through. A lot of people thought that I was, I don't like to use this word, but crazy,
mhm,
because how could one person be doing all of this to you? They don't get it. They don't get it. I'm grateful that they don't get it, because that means they didn't have to go through what I went through, right? But that doesn't help me when I feel alone. And that's why a professional is very, very important, especially like I said earlier on, a professional that's been through what you've been through, because
mhm,
they're able to connect with you on a level that you need, and that they understand what you're dealing with. They know every emotion you're feeling. They know what you're going to say before you even say it,
mhm.
because they've been there and
Right.
they understand. Having that removes that feeling of loneliness, because a lot of times when you're surrounded by people who have not been through what you've been through and have not had a toxic relationship in their past, not only do they not understand what you're saying, they don't know what to say to make it better. They don't know what to say to help you truly move forward. That goes back to hearing what you want to hear versus what you need to hear.
Mhm, mhm. You've been so gracious sharing a little bit about your story and your past and how you've worked through this. And I know that some people may be thinking about reaching out for professional help and things may get in the way and stop them. And so, how long did it take you to realize you needed professional help to work through this?
Well, I knew I needed help pretty much from the start, because I went into a period of destruction. I was angry. I was angry. I was destroying things. I like physically destroying things. Um, I shut everyone and everything out of my life. I would go from, crying one minute to completely in a blind rage the next minute. It was a roller coaster of every emotion you can feel and think of. Um, I knew I needed help pretty much immediately, like I said, but I reached out to someone within 2 months. I felt like I needed help, because those beginning stages are your most vulnerable to potentially go back.
Uh,
Because when you leave a toxic person, 99.9% of the time, they are fueled by control. The fact that you walked away is going to be a problem for them. They are going to try to bring you back and get you into their grasps again. If you don't have a positive support and strong support system, whether it be a professional, like I said, or, loved ones, you are in those initial months vulnerable to be able to go back, especially because you're feeling lonely. you're feeling isolated. You think back to the time where at least I had somebody with me, I wasn't alone. And when you're feeling lonely and you're feeling isolated, you're feeling like you have nobody around you, and then you're still dealing with the betrayal, the hurt, the trauma, you know, you're more inclined to be sucked back in. So I would say the sooner you can get help, the better for yourself.
Yeah.
I highly recommend that. Yeah.
That's awesome advice. And I know we've gone through a lot today and talking about the healing journey and what comes after and during and what to expect. But for everyone listening, what are like 3 key takeaways or actions that you feel like people can start implementing now to begin their journey to this self-healing?
So journaling, like I mentioned earlier, is a big one. I feel like that's a huge one. Not only is it a great therapeutic way to get your emotions out on paper, especially when you don't have people to talk to, you're talking to yourself, right? So journaling is a huge one. Another thing to do is have grace for yourself. You're going to need it. You're going to need it because there's going to be days when you feel like you're not only not moving forward, but you're moving backwards. And that's okay. But don't feel discouraged and don't feel, one thought that I used to say was, well, this is what I've always gotten, so I might as well just accept it and just, this is what I'm always going to get. And then you just, you know what I mean? Like you're going to go back to the negative instead of moving forward towards the positive. So have grace for yourself. And last but not least is have a positive support system. You need to have that support system. Without it, you're not going to make it. I can say that with confidence. Without it, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
You need to have people around you that understand you and can help you move forward. And not just that, a professional that has been through what you've been through, they have the ability to kind of, for me, I had a lot of inner demons, I think I mentioned earlier, that I needed to work through. Those childhood demons carried through into my adult life, which led me to the situation that I found myself in. That professional is going to be able to help you dive deep into your true self to understand how you ended up in this situation you were in.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say something to keep in mind during the healing process is be ready to do things and face things and work through things that are not going to be comfortable and pleasant. But keep in mind and always remind yourself, this is for my highest good. I am transforming myself into the person that I was meant to be. And I'm going to allow myself the opportunity to create the life that I've always wanted, past this trauma. And believe it or not, it's hard for people to understand and even fathom or wrap their head around. I don't say it to him personally, but I now thank him for coming into my life because he taught me what I needed to know.
Mm-hmm.
I was always meant to learn this lesson about myself. I was just not getting it all the other times that I was approached with the opportunity to learn. So, this person came into my life and really made sure I got the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of having hatred for him and, blaming him for all the negatives, and, I choose to now say, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, because I now am the person that I've always been meant to be. And if it wasn't for him, nothing in my life would have changed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so awesome that you're able to kind of have this almost peace about it now and recognize, the lessons and what you've brought out of it versus kind of just continuing to allow it to be this dark cloud over your life, and you've pushed through to move forward and live the life that you really want to live every day now.
Exactly. And that's something that I always want people to remember is imagine your life in peace.
Yeah.
Which is something that most of us that have been through it couldn't even imagine at one point in our life. Like, what are you talking about peace? And what do you mean thank him for doing this to me? Like, are you crazy? Like,
yeah.
But coming from somebody who's been through it in a way that's, you can literally write a book about it. For me to be where I am now, I am like walking testament. Like, I'm living proof that it's possible and you can find it and you will have a life that you want. Beyond this is not going to define who you are.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the catalyst to make you the better version of yourself that you've always been meant to be.
That's awesome. And I'm so proud of you and this journey that you've gone on, even though I've only been a part of a very, very small part of it. And I just want to say thank you so much for kind of sitting down with me today and to talk about this, because I know so many women and people are dealing with this. And so all of Sally's information is going to be in the comment section. And if you feel compelled to reach out to her, you can definitely book a call with her to kind of get to know her more and see how she could help.
Thank you
Thank
so much. This was
you.
really great. Thank you for having me.